Yeah, I think we are ready to go. Welcome to Case Study Webinar. This is the second one in a new series of webinar broadcasted here by Umbraco HQ. In this series, we'll be talking about a certain case study published on umbraco.com. And just to introduce myself, I am Anders Sorensen. I am head of our partner and sales channels here in Umbraco. And just to give you a little background of this, most web projects today, neither the customer, the project owner, or the web agency know the end result before the project is started. So other case studies can be a big help to align expectations and serve for inspiration for the upcoming project. The purpose of this today is to dive a bit deeper into a certain case in a certain sector and highlight some of the thoughts and purpose of before the project is started, some of the challenges and key elements of the project, and also some of the learnings and takeouts from the project. So if you are an end client, if you are a marketeer, a business owner, or a CMO with interest in the sector today, or even a web agency and wants inspiration, then this is the right place to be. This very webinar is about a great project built by Umbraco Gold partner Radley, Eldar, located in United Kingdom, and we'll look into the corporate site that they have built for their client, ArcelorMittal, as they transform their website into a modern site. With me today, I have George Butler representing Radley Eldar and the wonderful Elizabeth Brown from ArcelorMittal. George and Elizabeth, please introduce yourself and share with us what you have for us here for the next 30 minutes.
Thanks, Anders. Well, hello, everyone. My name's George Butler. I'm the Digital Strategy Director at Radley Eldar. Radley Eldar is an integrated agency, so we do a range of comms, range of digital work, and looking forward to diving into how we turn this project into a success with ArcelorMittal. I'll hand over to Liz to introduce herself.
Yep. Hi, I'm Liz. I am the brand content and campaign manager at ArcelorMittal within the corporate communications team. ArcelorMittal is the world's leading steel and mining company. It was the largest. I think we've just been replaced by a Chinese steel company, but yeah, we are definitely the leading.
What we're going to do, so we'll just really dive into the core challenge that we found during discovery, look at the key elements of the solution that we kind of developed together, and then talk about the wins for the project, what went really well, but also be quite candid and quite open about what we learned in the project too. And then also, now that the project has ended, which kind of we launched just before lockdown, so it's been up and running for about 6 months. So we'll look to the future as well, and then draw some conclusions on the kind of change that's happened with this new platform in place. Just before we do that, we'll do a quick kind of intro to the companies that we're working for. So Liz mentioned she works for ArcelorMittal.
Yeah, so ArcelorMittal is steel and mining. We have a presence in over 60 countries, and we've got primary steel making facilities in 18 countries, and we employ just under 200,000 employees worldwide. I work for the corporate communications team. So ArcelorMittal is quite a complex business. It's decentralized, so it's almost like a number of small businesses operating under one ArcelorMittal brand. Because we're decentralized, that means that each country or segment or part of the business has their own marketing and communications team. So at corporate level, our responsibility really is to protect the reputation of ArcelorMittal at group level. So in terms of key stakeholders, that would be investors, journalists, governments, customers, anything that might affect sort of the group reputation, we are there for. We also manage the communications for our CEO and executive office. We work very closely with our communications network, and we manage the global brand as well. So in terms of, I'll just go briefly into sort of, if you want to start actually, George.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I suppose this was the vision that for the site that we came up with right at the beginning of the project during discovery. And it was really about repositioning the business around this new purpose that they'd articulated of being the steel and mining company that's inventing smarter steels for a better world. And through consultation, we found that being really open, being really transparent, thoughtful about the issues that are facing the sector and also the wider world was a really important thing to get across. So we came up with a vision for the site, which is an industry-leading experience that's open, transparent, engaging and thoughtful. So stakeholders feel they're invited into the real ArcelorMittal, the one that's inventing smarter steels for a better world. So with that vision in place, we were able to start really building up from that where we wanted to go, and the rest of the work kind of came from there. So Liz, if you want to kind of, that's an image of what the site was before, not how it is today.
Yeah. So just taking a step back in terms of the reason for doing the project, as George said, we had just developed a new purpose. It took about a year to do that project. As I said, we've got a presence in over 60 countries, so ranging from Americas to Brazil to Kazakhstan, so that the business is very different depending on which region it's operating in. So to come up with a common purpose, which was inventing smarter steels for a better world, it took us quite a long time. So we wanted our website to really bring that purpose to life. So that was one reason. The previous website was 7 years old. Very much had become a victim of, I'd say honestly, so I guess a lack of full editorial control. So it probably was fit for purpose when it was built, but lots of content had been added on. So it was very easy to get lost in the old website. Functionality was quite poor as well. Lots of good content was buried. And one of the main points for us, and not just saying this because of this call, but the previous CMS we had was very poor. We were hardly able to do anything on it ourselves. We were relying on the digital agency to do most of the updates for us, which A, takes a lot of time, and B, was very expensive for us. So those are the reasons why we did the project.
I think, Elizabeth, this is a very common situation for a lot of companies out there, having an old CMS, 7 years old, and just been keeping on building on the current one.
Yeah.
So I don't think you are alone with this experience.
No, I mean, I think as well, I don't know whether it's because we had inadequate training or whether the CMS we had was difficult to use, but no one knew how to use it. So that you never, as much as I love working with George and Radley Eldar, you never want to be over-reliant on your agency for just making what should be very simple updates.
Mm. And then this is where we got to on, and that's the live site at the moment, so ArcelorMittal.com. Quite a significant change, much more visual, much more engaging content, and really aligned behind this very clear message of inventing smarter steels for a better world. Underneath that, there's a lot of exploration of the issues and the kind of challenges that face the industry, but also really positioning the business as the leader within the marketplace to be able to be the vanguard for change, really. So from a personal perspective, it was a really exciting project because of that stark change that the business was really, from the top, was really ready to do. And that makes, as a strategist, makes it quite a kind of exciting conversation to help consult, make that change follow through. A little bit about RY, Radley Eldar. We're here to create belief in business. So we help large companies like ArcelorMittal across a range of different sectors to create belief in their businesses. So I suppose looking at this project, it was really how do we create belief in this new statement around inventing smarter steels for a better world? How do we make that credible? How do we make people engage with that? And the key areas that we work in with corporates are on the brand level, brand identity, etc., campaign work, experiences like the experience that we've developed, and also reporting. So all those 4 areas are the core kind of tools, let's say, that businesses have to create belief in their stakeholder groups that they're communicating with regularly. I think we live in a world today where if you can't communicate with people outside your organization and bring them on board, then they're going to make your lives very difficult. And that creates a long-term strategic issue for a business like ArcelorMittal. So being able to communicate well with them means that you're able to deliver your strategy and deliver the returns that are expected of the business. Diving into the challenge, I suppose there were a few. We've outlined some already. But I suppose the challenge really was to set some clear objectives or set an ambition for where we want to be going. So we talked about it in terms of having a business objective, a communication objective, and a digital one, just so that we begin to get some tent pegs, let's say, on the project, and we're able to have something that we can begin to focus in on. I don't know, Liz, whether you have anything to add on this particular bit.
I mean, the communication objective, I mean, we've talked about our purpose, but I think that there are a lot of misconceptions about A, the steel industry, and B, ArcelorMittal. Either people don't know who we are, or they just know or have heard about us because of Mr. Mittal. So we really wanted to sort of get across or to change any misconceptions and to raise awareness, not only of us, but also the broader industry. And then, yeah, so the digital objective had to sort of sit with that. So if we want to be known as Steel Company for the future, we couldn't have a site that was clunky to use with content that wasn't future focused. So those are just some key points to highlight.
And then while we were going through discovery, which we'll talk about in a minute and be honest about the discovery process that we went through, we did uncover some kind of broader issues or things that we need to kind of consider. If there are any kind of key things that you wanted to draw out here, Liz. Yeah,
in terms of the role and purpose of the website, so I've only been working at ArcelorMittal for a couple of years. So in terms of, I saw the project initially as the website being the vehicle for communicating updates on business and really there to tell our story. However, it became very quickly apparent to me that because of the focus on sustainability and a lot of the regulatory work that we have to do and disclose, a lot of that content, the only place for it to be accessed is via the website. So we had to balance with this project a site that could tell our story, so to engage our audience, but also the website had to almost somehow hold a lot of, I guess, quite dry corporate legal documents. So it is quite difficult to think how do we have a website that achieves both of those, so people can very quickly get to the relevant regulatory document they need to, but if people want to immerse themselves in what we do, and they can also do that. So that was sort of really the role of the website. We'll probably talk about content strategy quite a few times, but we are a very, very small team at ArcelorMittal in the corporate communications team. So the core project team is made up of myself in terms of day-to-day management, our head of brand, who act almost as he acted as the editorial consultant internally. And then we had a couple of people from our IT team. So that's very, very small. We don't have a digital communications team. We don't have a content team. We don't have any of those things. As I said, we're also decentralized. So there is no central resource to get content and stories. So we came up with a strategy. We can talk later about whether that was the right strategy or not. The other thing to consider, so initially the brief to Radley Eldar was not just to look at our corporate website, but we also have a lot of other ArcelorMittal websites, as I said, because we're decentralized. Each country or region will have their own website as well. Technically, they should align with the corporate website in terms of the look of them. Some of them use the same CMS as the previous sites, some don't. So that was a consideration. So originally that was part of the brief. We had to remove it and treat it as a separate project just because it got too complicated. And security is a huge issue for us as well. We're constantly, there are lots and lots of attempts to hack our infrastructure. So that was another thing. And in terms of project considerations, probably if there are people from other organizations on the call, I mean, these must look very familiar to them. So as always, you have a limited budget and time frame. We have a small team. Something that was really critical for us, because we are a small team, is thinking about putting a solution in place. And this is where the CMS comes into it, that we could easily manage moving forward. So in terms of updates to the site, but also thinking about content updates as well. And then we had a number of other projects that were happening at the same time. So we had a lot of stakeholder management to do.
The key elements of the solution became quite clear when we were going through the project, but really it was about having a mobile first site. So the old site didn't include any responsive design or anything like that. So we noticed when Google changed their algorithm to address sites that don't serve mobile users particularly well, there was a significant dip in mobile traffic from that date onwards, which impacted the overall traffic to the site. So that was a key thing that we had to get right, and think about, not just from a back-end perspective in terms of how it's built, but make sure that the content was easy to read and easy to absorb from a mobile, as opposed to putting reams and reams of content in there. We had to really address the new core purpose that the business was going for. And from a design perspective, it was really thinking early on in terms of a design system that we could use and adapt and build on, and when needed, that can then be driven out through to other sites. So we had a core kind of asset there, and then identify those content owners within the business. Stakeholder management was key and quite difficult for things that Liz mentioned, mainly because there are so many other things going on at the time, as there is, I suppose, the whole time. But really engaging with those content owners early on was something that we strived to do. And then thinking about content, Liz mentioned the content had to deliver quite regulatory, kind of detailed legal documentation, as well as inspire people, really connect with people at the top end. So we used a really simple format, which you may have heard of, which is Hero, Hub and Hygiene. So we were able to then focus our attention on hero content. How does that content differ to a piece of hygiene content? Do we need to focus our effort on hygiene content very much? Or actually, do we want to kind of focus on this? So it helped us to really shape the website and identify the key areas that we wanted to focus in on. And then a really easy to use CMS, which I'll hand over to Liz now, because it launched just before lockdown, which meant that all the cards are thrown up in the air. And luckily, I think that meant that everyone in the team had to kind of adopt it. And Liz, what have you got to kind of say about that period of time?
I'd say I am the least technical of people ever. I panic about anything technical. When we were working through the project and we kept talking about the content management system, at the time I had someone in our team supporting me who wanted to and took it upon herself to sort of own the process of learning the CMS. Brilliant for me, because she just got on with uploading content. She then left, so I had a sort of a 48-hour window where I had to learn the CMS. And yeah, but over a weekend, it was just so intuitive, very easy to use. Everything is modular, everything can be tested, everything can be viewed before you publish anything. If you make a mistake and you publish something, you can quickly unpublish something. So I managed to teach myself the CMS 48 hours. Everyone subsequently who then, and we tried to limit the number of people who have access to the CMS to maintain some editorial control over the website. everyone's the same. There's sort of a 2-day panic, and then every single person will come back to me and say how much pleasure they have, I think, in using it. It might be because we are a very corporate organization, so our ability to do anything creative is limited. It's probably the most creative thing that we get to do is make updates on the website with the CMS. But yeah, it is, yeah. And I'm not just saying this, it was probably one of the easiest things in the project.
And George, at Radley Eldar, you have a bunch of different projects like this. I mean, these 5 key elements, they seem very basic to me. They are supposed to be in pretty much every new project today. Isn't that right?
Yeah, they are. I think getting the mobile thing right. But I mean, also it's about thinking about where the business has come from. And if you've got a legacy way of working. I mean, when we started working with, I can't remember his name now, but there was one person who was almost like the webmaster at ArcelorMittal. So everyone culturally was culturally, I could see it when I kind of started working. It was like, oh, it's that guy's kind of responsibility, which immediately culturally kind of creates a barrier to actually get involved in this stuff. But because it's so easy to use, it somehow made it easier, and people are more inclined to get involved.
And I also add, I mean, they may look standard points, but I mean, for us, it's the nuances that you take as an organization. So for us, okay, it's very easy to say have a clear content strategy, but it was critical for us because we didn't have anyone to gather content for us. So, and also for us to actually identify the people in our business who could help us with content. I mean, that's the thing with such a big organization. You sometimes don't even know who you have to go to. So it's really critical. It doesn't matter whether you have a content team or you don't. It's just thinking about the right strategy for your business. The hero hub and hygiene, to George's point, because of the regulation aspects, that was a really big thing for us to look at is what's hygiene, and also because of our limited budget, how many pieces of hero content could we have? Where could they sit? What was appropriate for us as a business?
We then created, I suppose, at Discovery, we created a manifesto that just helped us to keep focused on it. In the interest of time, I'm going to kind of skip over this a little bit if everyone's okay with it. This was about really making sure the team were clearly focused on a set of activities, and it was kind of that spark for change that enabled us to get to where we are today. And the wins from the project, we managed to, even though it was lockdown and the lockdown, the usual behavioural trends on websites changed quite a lot. But after launch, we found once it was stable and everything was happy, that we were getting about a third extra visitors, so 33% increase in visits, which was kind of, I don't know whether it was expected or not, but we put a lot of effort into making sure that we're able to attract the right people and make sure that they were, we're putting the right content out for the audiences we identified, but also there was a lot of making sure that the website was easy to find on search, loads really quickly. So all of those kind of back-end things that were really kind of brought into the project and made sure that we're kind of much more of an outward-facing website. One of the key bits of hero content was making steel. So we realized from an SEO perspective quite early on that the majority of terms that were being, people were finding the site were sort of ArcelorMittal related or brand related terms or people related terms. And as a leader within the sector, we felt that this was one of the many ways that we could begin to just open up the breadth of the audience and reach a new audience to take that new positioning too. So making steel, we created a kind of an immersive experience to help people really understand the process that people go through. And it was actually quite nice to see that on putting that up there, it became the most popular piece of content within the About Us section. And is a mainstay within the overall site as well. It's a kind of a key entry point to the site. We now need to keep optimizing that and focusing on how we can get people to go into the rest of the website, into the wider estate. But it was, it's a key step, we feel, to reaching that new audience. And then a couple of other kind of points. Liz, I don't know if you want to kind of...
I know I'm conscious of time, so
yeah.
I just picking out sort of the important things in this. So for us, again, obviously we've had COVID. Our site launched just before COVID. It's been really difficult for us to sort of then refocus attention back on it. But now we are. So how we're viewing is we have an awesome platform to build on. So helped by the really great design, also helped by the modular system enabled through the CMS. So we're really, really happy with the site, really happy with the CMS system, and also learnings for us in terms of how better to go about these things in future, especially around the content perspective. So I'll come on to that, I guess, next in terms of learnings. Yeah. Please chip in, George. So
yeah, sure.
Again, this is sort of it's when the project went on, I think, for about 18 months. Obviously, you will have people leave and join agencies and our team, but that did slow us down on occasion, sort of having to sort of retrace our steps and sort of rebrief people. George can talk a little bit about this. Sort of the project initially started as a Waterfall project. We had to move to Agile. Again, because of the way our organization is set up, we just had too many stakeholders to manage. Also, a lot of our stakeholders like to see things in situ. So I would say we spent far too much time on the strategy and should have got to the execution a lot quicker. So it would have been better to have had the site and some content up a lot earlier. So we could then share it with people. We had time to change things. So I think the other thing with spending too much time on strategy is some of your stakeholders think they might be getting more than they actually get. Eventually, so it's just.
No, I totally agree. That was a key learning for us, really. We, I mean, as a strategist, of course, I want to be there stroking my beard for as long as possible, but actually the best approach is to keep that discovery to the specific point so that we're clear on functionality, clear on the scale of the content task, and clear on the design and the technical kind of elements, but only so much, you don't need to have that in so much detail that it begins to put the kind of grind the gears on the project. I think, we're now doing with other clients, a much quicker discovery process that's, less than a month, so that we can then get on and start building things. And then get into that iterative process so people see stuff. It's, some clients find it difficult to adopt that process, and it's a different kind of relationship on a kind of commercial front. But ultimately, we found it just gets the results quicker, and people have a much more engaging kind of creative experience doing that, as opposed to the plodding kind of waterfall kind of process that everyone will know from previous projects.
And the other thing to point out that's relevant, of course, for this call is, and I know it was because of the time in the project when the CMS was put in place, but the sooner you can have the CMS up and running and the sooner you can train people on it, not just a handful, but as many as you feel is appropriate, the better. We had a lot of content to migrate from our old site. I think we underestimated the volume of work that involved in terms of sort of uploading that to the new site. I think that when people weren't using the CMS, there was that fear factor, when actually it's super easy to use. So if we were to do it again, I would have more people train on the CMS much earlier on in the process and using it.
Mm. And then what's the point around engaging the project owner differently?
So our ultimate project owner is our vice president, who heads up the communications and corporate responsibility team. She is very much a person who likes to see things. So we were trying to engage her by showing written content, visual content. I call them flats, but sort of PDFs. She wanted to see things on the website. So again, if we were to do it again, if we were to have a draft site up sort of quicker to be able to share that with the project owner, that would have been a better way to engage her. I mean, it all just happened a lot of work happened in a very short time frame at the end of the project, which is never good for anyone's sanity.
Yeah. And then looking to the future, I mean, we've mentioned that we've got a really solid platform in place. These are some of the things that you guys have focused on at ArcelorMittal. For me, it's about SEO and making sure that that content is talking to the kind of key SEO areas that we're looking at, and making sure that campaigns that you're doing off-site are linking into the website as well. A key change for the website from the old one was having this new opinion section around smarter future, which was a really kind of exciting thing that we were developing at the time. And I think that's something that, again, it's one of those areas that requires constant effort. So that's something to build on the opinions, build on the discussion that's happening within the business, and taking that out to show the leadership, I suppose, in where things are going.
I mean, I would say, again, just to sort of round off on this call, one of the nicest things now is every time something happens in our business, if we publish a big global report, there's a press conference about it, is thinking about the ways you use the CMS to publish that content. And it's so nice because there are so many options available to you. Maybe we don't have all of the things that we could have. Maybe we could put forward suggestions for things that we want to have. But I mean, there's normally about 6 or 7 ways to do the one thing that you want to do. It's figuring out what's appropriate to you. But it's such an easy to understand and use modular system that it's very helpful for us.
Great. And then any kind of final conclusions on the project? I mean, my conclusions are that yes, it took a long time. I think there were a lot of stakeholders within the business that perhaps hadn't done a project like this. We were able to change the way we went about the project as well, which was quite a big kind of thing. But ultimately, that initial kind of vision was something that we stuck to, and something that we used as a stick to kind of beat ourselves and say that that's what we're really trying to focus on here. And getting that repositioning as being the kind of the core of the project, the real driver behind it was something that I felt was made the project exciting.
I mean, I'd say it's sort of all on our perspective. Make sure you have the right project team in place. I mean, it sounds obvious, but halfway through, you kind of realize you maybe don't have the right people, or they're not doing the things they should be doing. Really think heavily about your content strategy. We totally underestimated the amount of time and investment that it would need from us. I'd also say try to have one editor, or I think towards the end of our project, some of the content on the site suffered perhaps because there were multiple editors or content owners there. So at least when you're developing the site, try to have one editor who has oversight over things, and really think about long-term how you're going to keep the site updated. And that sort of relates to resource and the CMS system. So really think about what resource you have in place to manage it moving forwards.
That's it.
Great project. I just posted in the chat a link to the written case study here. And this webinar is recorded, and we will put that on the case study as well. So if you want to see it again, then you can. It will be published in a couple of hours, I would expect. Thank you, George. Thank you, Elizabeth. If you have any questions out there, just write it in the chat, and we'll stay tuned for another minute before we jump off. Otherwise, I'll just say that this was the second webinar in this webinar series, and stay tuned for more coming up over the next couple of months. We will strive to have almost a webinar on each case study that we publish on Umbraco.com, and that's about once a week. So I expect a lot more interesting case studies in a lot of different sectors, from a lot of different gold partners to a lot of different clients will be coming up. Thank you. Thank you, George.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you, Liz.
Thanks.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.